Well, we just made it through Thanksgiving of 2020. And now we're approaching Christmas of 2020. And then after that, of course, is New Year's. And New Year's is interesting because it's the time when you reflect on the last year and you ask yourself what you would want to do different in the next year. And it got me thinking about what has this last year been, and if I could give this year a name or make my own movie poster for the year 2020, the subtitle would be Year of Fear. We've seen a lot of fear this year. Fear of things like not having enough toilet paper, to fear of catching a disease, fear of losing a family member, or of death, or of losing a job. We've seen a lot of fear of who's going to become the next president, fear of what's going to happen to the global and the U.S. economy. A lot of fear this year. And the reason why that's dangerous is because fear allows us to be controlled. Now, on the surface, there's nothing bad about fear. Fear keeps us safe from imminent harm. You're walking down a street and there's a dark alley and all of a sudden you feel this sensation of fear because you don't know if someone's in there waiting for you, or maybe some animal. Think about before cities, you're wandering between towns and you hear this familiar sound that before meant a wild animal was about to attack you, and you felt fear. So fear itself keeps us safe, but imagine a whole year of just constant fear and fear of, oh gosh, I'm going to sneeze. Fear of sneezing. Fear of sneezing is the worst, but a whole year of fear. And well, what is fear? Because this will help us define why it's so bad that we've been in the state of fear for so long. I'm curious what your definition is. Go ahead and throw it down in the comments. Here's my definition for fear. Fear is an emotional response to consequences we don't want. We are anticipating consequences that we don't want to happen. So like losing a job, you can fear losing a job because of all that means. You can fear losing a family member because of all that means. Fear is that emotion that comes from wondering what the consequences are going to be, this fear of consequences. But that definition itself doesn't help us out that much. Actually, I think thinking of fear more analogically would help. Think of fear this way. Fear is being in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of a storm. You're being tossed about by waves. A wave comes, crashes over you, you come up, and immediately you're looking for when that next wave is going to hit. You're in this state of reacting. You're reacting to this wave. You're being tossed about. You're not looking 10 miles down the horizon for land because you're constantly having to react to the next wave. So fear is an emotion that keeps us reacting. We're constantly reacting to things around us. We're not looking forward. We're not planning ahead. We lose perspective. Fear is being in the middle of a storm, just swimming in the ocean, holding on for dear life. And because of that, because fear has us constantly reacting, we can be controlled and manipulated. Let's say land is 10 miles that way. Well, the waves, maybe we're just avoiding waves trying to stay up, and we're actually getting pushed the opposite direction. We can be manipulated because we're constantly reacting. So fear is really dangerous for us because we can be so easily controlled. And when we are afraid, we start to get angry. Fear causes us to get angry. I've seen so much anger this year on social media. When we're afraid, we got to find the source of fear, and then we get angry at that source of fear. What is the thing that's going to harm us, that's going to take away our freedom, that's going to kill? What is that source? Then we can be angry at that. That's the enemy. We pick out the enemy. But the problem is we have picked out the wrong enemy. The Bible in Ephesians 6 says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." You see, we have all picked out humans as our enemy. Whether it's some political figure or the people running the news media, they become our enemy, and we lose sight of the true enemy who's manipulating us behind the scenes because of fear. Satan is using fear to control and shift this nation to a direction it was never intended to go. You see, I truly believe that fear is the most effective weapon that Satan has. Satan will use fear in order to bring division and hatred to not only this country, but this church, but God's church. You see, I know people, there's some churches who say if you are not Republican, there's no way you can be Christian. And then I know other churches that say if you're not a Democrat, there's no way you can be Christian. And they both have the passages that they'll use to defend their position. And as a result, we just start shooting arrows at each other, and we hate each other, and we don't try and understand each other. So the church is divided, and the church hates itself, and we're supposed to be defined by love instead. But instead, we're defined by our hatred, and we're ruled by fear because we've lost sight of who the true enemy is. And because we're constantly afraid, our lives are being ruined by this fear. Just a few weeks ago, I heard my grandma, she came out of the room and she said, if Biden gets elected, he's going to close down all of the churches. That's ridiculous. Biden goes to church. He is Catholic. He is a regular attender of Catholic Mass. He goes to church. He's not going to close down churches. And yet, the media manipulates it, and I think partially because of their own fear, but there's this manipulation of words and getting us to fear what will happen. But hopefully at your age, you're not concerned about politics. Maybe that's not your source of fear. But what about things like fear of rejection? You see, fear of rejection destroys friendships before the friendships even have a chance to start. Fear of abandonment can ruin the friendships we have because we keep destroying them ourselves out of defense. What about fear of failure? Fear of failure can cause us to overstress and then just fail a test. The fear of failure itself can cause us to fail a test because of stress. And then that, of course, leads us to fear of not getting into college, which can then keep us in this perpetual state of stress throughout our whole academic year. Fear kills us and ruins our lives. But Jesus came with the answer to that. Jesus came to bring peace through his death and resurrection. Jesus came to conquer fear through peace. And he did so. He brought peace because of what we have through his death and resurrection. And we as the church had an opportunity this year to bring peace to a fearful nation, to a fearful world. But we missed that opportunity. Instead of bringing peace in the midst of fear, we spread the fear ourselves. We spread rumors about things that couldn't possibly be true. We shared all these conspiracy theories and caused more division, more hatred, more fear. And we took away people's peace from them. And the reason we did this is because we ourselves do not experience that peace. We haven't come to accept the peace of Christ in ourselves, so we had nothing to give. If fear is like drowning in the storm in the middle of the ocean, peace is like being in a boat. Being in a large boat, the storm is raging, but it doesn't matter. You're in a boat. You're looking around, you're finding land, you pick out the spot, you start driving that way, you open a can of Coke, or in my case, Diet Coke, and you start sipping away because the storm's got nothing. You have a perspective. You have safety because of peace. And Jesus wants to give us that peace, but we don't have it as a church, and it's shown. So I'm going to spend this Christmas season talking about how the birth of Jesus, this birth story, preaches to us the peace that we're supposed to have. We're going to talk about 3 times in the birth story when it says, "Do not be afraid." And each time it gives a different reason why we should not be afraid. And we're going to just spend the next 3 weeks talking about that as we approach this Christmas season, so that this Christmas we look for peace. The title of the series is a play on words with Mariah Carey's song, but we're calling it "All I Want for Christmas is Peace." Because that should be our hope. That's what we need this year, and that's what we should want every Christmas, is peace on earth. But the thing is, we keep saying peace on earth, and we don't believe that it's actually going to be here. And yet, we have an opportunity to bring peace. So I hope you'll join me the next few weeks as we talk about how Jesus gives us peace and how we can then share that with the world. I'll see you in the next video.